So in 1979, in June 1979, with the assistance of of Dr. Beyers Naudé, I crossed the border into Botswana, and on a small koppie on a hill just outside Gaborone, I met a couple of ANC leaders. Among them was also someone who later on became very well known here in South Africa, Billy Matsetla, another white ANC member, Marius Skoon, and I joined the ANC, and I also joined Umkhonto we Sizwe. So the decision was that because I was a student, because I could work in the underground inside the country, that I would come back to South Africa and become part of what Comrade Oliver Tambo used to call in those broadcasts on Radio Freedom the internal machinery of Umkhonto we Sizwe. So I had a few short crash courses as a soldier of Umkhonto we Sizwe, got trained in a few basic things like how to prime a limpet mine, how to be able to shoot with an AK-47, how to do reconnaissance for targets. In and out of the country a few times, but I stayed inside South Africa and I worked in the underground. I was part of an MK cell in Alexandra. I worked with people such as Obed Bapela, Vincent Shabalala, Depo Mfalasi, many comrades whose names are still known in our liberation struggle. And I participated in that liberation struggle as part of identifying targets for military operations of Umkhonto we Sizwe. We did so in what was then known as the PWV area, or the old Transvaal around Johannesburg, and also in the Northwest province, which was then, as I've said, the Western Transvaal. We identified police stations. We planted limpet mines in those police stations. I also planted a pamphlet bomb and a limpet mine at the South African Defence Force Recruitment Centre, at the Carlton Centre in the centre of Johannesburg. And I was involved in the identification of various other targets in Johannesburg, which included the SABC and also the Johannesburg Gas Works. But unfortunately, for that cell that I worked with, we were infiltrated by a security policeman who was posing as a student at the University of the Witwatersrand, a spy with the name of Robert Whitecross. And we trusted him, we worked with him, so he exposed that cell of Umkhonto we Sizwe. And on the 23rd of August 1983, I remember it still very clearly, it's etched in my mind. I was just coming back the day before from having been to Cape Town for the launch of the United Democratic Front, which was launched in Mitchell's Plain in Cape Town. We returned back, I was in bed, I was sleeping, and suddenly there was a lot of noise in the house, in the student house where I was staying, and I opened my eyes and I was looking down the barrel of an R5 machine gun. And the security policeman was standing above my bed, holding that gun against my head. So they raided the house, they arrested me, they arrested my then fiancée, who later on became my first wife, Yancy Lawrence. We were taken to John Foster Square, the notorious John Foster Square, and detained in solitary confinement without trial. So we were kept there for a couple of months. Those were probably some of the worst times of my life because I was severely tortured in detention. They wanted to get the information from me about who I worked with, what were the operations that we were involved in. That torture was so severe that I lost most of my hearing. I'm totally dependent up to this day on very, very powerful hearing aids. I've lost more than 67% of my hearing because of the torture, because my eardrums were perforated, the way they punched me, the way they tortured me. And I'm proud that despite that torture, despite everything that I went through there, despite the many, many long weeks of solitary confinement, I never gave away any information about those that I worked with. I resisted to sell out, to give away information. And then at the end of that year, I was then charged together with my fiancée, Yancy Lawrence. We were charged with high treason. Now, it is interesting, high treason means that you have betrayed your country. I haven't betrayed my country. I was fighting against a small, white, apartheid, racist minority. But yet they arraigned me in that court here in the center of Johannesburg, the High Court, which is right there in what was then known as Pritchard Street, next to the Central Methodist Church. And eventually, we were subjected to a very, very vicious court case, where it then turned out that Robert Whitecross, as I said, who infiltrated the cell that I worked with in Alexandra, was the main witness. He exposed all the activities that we were part of. All our ANC and Umkhonto we sees were underground activities. And that led to a situation that we were found guilty of high treason, or so-called high treason. I remember that court case very well, and how the prosecutor, a certain Mr. Jan Swanepoel, viciously interrogated me when I gave evidence in mitigation. And he said to me, "Young man, will you, if you ever manage to get out of prison, fight the apartheid system again?" I said to the judge, Mr. Justice Myburg, I said, "Yes, Your Honor, I will." He said, "Young man, will you be prepared, if you get the chance, to even kill the state president of the Republic of South Africa, Mr. P.W. Botha?" I said, "Yes, Your Honor, I will, because he's an evil man, and he is implementing an evil racist system, which is a crime against humanity." And then the judge said from the bench, "You better watch your words, because remember, you are being charged for high treason. I may just decide to send you to death and hang you." And I looked up at him. Perhaps I was a little bit arrogant, but I think it was more courage. And I said to him, "Your Lordship, suit yourself." So that is what happened during that trial. My senior counsel, Dennis Cooney, was my lawyer representing me, came to my cells after I gave that evidence, and he said, "Well, I don't know what to say now. I don't know what they're going to do to you." So I was prepared to die. I was prepared to get the death sentence. But finally, the judge decided to give me a 15-year sentence. And then from prison there, I went off to the old Pretoria Maximum Security Prison, which is today known as the Kgosi Mampuru Prison. When you drive into Pretoria, into Tshwane, from Johannesburg, that's the first big building that you find on your left-hand side as you enter Tshwane, as you enter Pretoria. So I sat in that prison for many years. I was kept there together with a few other white political prisoners, because remember, apartheid was all pervasive. Even in prison, they kept white prisoners and black prisoners separate. So all the black political prisoners who had been sentenced for their membership of the liberation movements, especially the African National Congress, most of them went to Robben Island. But the few white comrades who were part of the liberation struggle were never taken to Robben Island. We were kept in the Pretoria Maximum Security Prison. Now, the Pretoria Maximum Security Prison was also death row, the death row prison. So in those cells where we were being kept, we could hear when the time came for someone who had been sentenced to death to go to the gallows. And at night you would sit in your cell and you can hear those comrades and that prisoner who has been sentenced to death singing throughout the night. And they're singing these liberation songs. I still sometimes, even today, when I wake up in the middle of the night, it's like an echo that I can hear those songs coming back to me. And then early in the morning, you can hear the wardens coming to collect this comrade, this prisoner who has been sentenced to death. You can hear the cell door opening, the clang of the key in the cell door. Then they come walking past our cells. You can hear them going down the stairs. And then it is silent. And then suddenly there's a loud clang, which is the trap door of the gallows falling away under the feet of that comrade that had been executed. And then there's silence again. And then you know that another comrade had died, had been executed for the struggle and made the ultimate sacrifice in the fight against apartheid. So those are some of the experiences that I carry with me. They are still very vivid in my memory, in my mind. And I spent almost 10 years in prison until the ANC was then eventually unbanned because of the manner in which the ANC and the people of South Africa, together with progressive forces within the international community, fought against apartheid. And it pushed the apartheid regime to the brink, where eventually they had to agree to negotiate. So the negotiations that started eventually led to F.W. de Klerk announcing the unbanning of the ANC and other liberation movements, also the release of the Rivonia trialists, among them President Nelson Mandela, and then slowly but surely the rest of the political prisoners of the African National Congress and the other liberation movements were also released as the negotiations were unfolding. And I was one of the last political prisoners to be released because the apartheid regime hated me. They did not want me to be released. In fact, the then Minister of Justice and of Correctional Services, a gentleman with the name of Kobie Coetzee, said publicly, "We do not want to release Niaus because he's a volksverraaier, he's a traitor to the nation." And the person who fought for my release, who was one of the advance team of the African National Congress who came into the country to start the negotiations, was Jacob Zuma. Jacob Zuma actually came to visit me in prison. And he told me, "Look, this apartheid regime, they do not want to release you, but I'm going to fight for your release." And although he was very, very busy with the negotiations, he would come almost every second week. He would come to visit me in prison, find out how my health was, how I was keeping. He kept on giving me hope that I will be released. When he leaves those prison visits, he would call my parents. My parents were right-wing Afrikaners, as I've told you earlier. So they were not necessarily happy to get a phone call from Jacob Zuma. But he kept on phoning them, he kept on telling them, "I'm trying to get your son out of prison." And eventually, he succeeded. Eventually, I was released, and it was one of the greatest, most joyous days of my life when I walked out of that maximum security prison, out there into the parking lot at the prison, and I could feel the sun on my body, the free air. I wrote a little piece about what an amazing experience it was for me to drive from Pretoria back to Johannesburg. I insisted that the comrades who came to pick me up had to open all the windows in the car. I was hanging halfway out of the window just to feel the fresh air. But what I also told them is immediately, I said, "Where is the ANC office in Johannesburg?" And we drove straight there, even before I went to see any of my family. I went to the ANC, I reported, I said, "I'm free, I'm here to work." At that time, it was in the center of Johannesburg. It wasn't yet in what was later known as Shell House. It was a building close to where the Walter Sisulu provincial office of the ANC is now in Johannesburg. So I went there, I met with various comrades of the leadership of the African National Congress. And they asked me, but you've been in prison for 10 years. What do you want to do? I said, I want to carry out the message of liberation. I want to work in communication. This is now 1991, early 1991. So I immediately joined what was then known as the ANC's Department of Information and Publicity. Those days, that department was run by a comrade with the name of Paulo Jordan. And I joined there, I started working. I never had any formal training in communication. But for some reason, I think I was lucky, perhaps it was just something that was born in. It came natural to me. And I was very, very, very privileged that very quickly after I started working there, I was quickly promoted, and eventually I became the head of the ANC's Media Liaison Unit. And I'm very proud to say at a young age, I became the national spokesperson of the African National Congress and also the spokesperson for President Nelson Mandela. I traveled with him, I would write his speeches. It was a big, big privilege for me to do that. One of the speeches I'm very proud of that I could write for him was a speech that he delivered when he received the Nobel Peace Prize in Oslo. And I still have one of my treasured possessions is a photo of me and President Mandela standing there, him holding the medal that he received and the citation for the Nobel Peace Prize. So those were precious moments and experiences where I was given an opportunity by the African National Congress to serve and to give from myself to the liberation struggle. There were also difficult times. In the run-up to the elections of 1994, on the 27th of April, there was a right-wing reaction to the elections coming. I remember a couple of weeks before those elections, on an early Sunday morning, I went to my office to quickly go and write some documents and to do an article that I was busy writing. And as I was sitting in my office working on my computer, suddenly the whole building shook. This was Shell House. And the window behind my back crashed over my head. I remember I fell down. I was literally lying on the floor amongst all these pieces of glass. And a right-wing group had planted a huge car bomb not far away from Shell House, and that car bomb exploded. Now you can still see the footage of what happened after that, because I jumped up from lying on that floor, I cleaned myself up, and I walked out. I went out of Shell House, and there were the media. There was a huge crater where this car bomb had exploded. There were people still being taken away who had been injured. In fact, a close comrade of mine, a lady comrade, was driving her car on the corner of the street where this bomb went off, and she died in that explosion. And on CNN and on some of the other international television networks, you can still find if you Google it, and on YouTube, you can find me standing there saying, we will not be intimidated. We will work to have these elections. We will not allow right-wingers to derail the democratization and the liberation project in South Africa. So that's the kind of life I lived at that time. It was not always easy. It was very, very tough sometimes.